Hey everyone, in this video we're going to dive into the brand new file share resource in Azure. And as I say that, I can imagine the comments in YouTube going, John, you're insane, we already have file shares in Azure. But wait, if we think about today's file shares, they're created as part of a storage account. So what we actually have as an Azure resource, the Azure resource is a storage account. Now, with that storage account, it supports a number of different types of services. You can have blobs, you can have queues, you can have tables, and yes, one of the types of things you could create is a file share. But this is just one of the types of service I can offer from a storage account. And I can do NFS, I can do SMB. The type can vary based on the type of storage account I can create. But it is just an aspect, one of the services of what is actually the storage account resource in Azure. And if I think about this base storage account, if all I want is a file share, well, there's a ton of different options that actually apply. So if I try and actually go and create a storage account, there are lots of options, and it may not be clear, well, what do I need to do? So if I jump over just for a second and we look. So if I was creating a storage account, okay, there's some things that are fairly standard. Okay, types of storage account, types of performance, redundancy, that's fair. Then under advanced, it's like, well, okay, wow, there's a lot of different options under here. And okay, so the networking, well, that applies to the storage account. Then there's data protection, encryption, etc., etc. So there's a lot of different options that go into that. And then it is the storage account itself that has limits. So there's lots of options, but then I can also think about, well, there's a shared data quota. And by data quota, I'm talking about the data plane in terms of, well, how much IOPS can I have? How much throughput can I have? If I was to once again go and look at a storage account, and to make it easy, I'm going to look at one of my provisioned types of storage account. So if I look at this, and I was to go and actually look at my file shares, it is at the storage account level that I have a certain amount of capacity available, a certain amount of IOPS available, a certain amount of throughput available. So as I go and create the various different file shares under that storage account, I have to be very conscious of that. There's also certain burst capabilities that would be at the storage account level. And then also there's a shared management quota. So there's a certain amount of management operations I can perform. So if I had a lot of storage accounts in a subscription and region and lots of different administrators, there's actually a chance I could start to hit the management limits for the storage account as I'm interacting with lots of different file shares. The networking configuration is at the storage account level. So my private endpoints are for the storage account and everything is going to share them. And then imagine I maybe want to do cross-charging back to a department using a certain file share, and there's many different file shares under it. That's really difficult to do today. I'd really have to go and create lots of different storage accounts. So it's really hard to split the cost allocations. Another thing that I probably don't like is there's these storage account level access keys. And all of this becomes quite problematic when I just want a file share. Now, you're probably guessing where this is going. So what we now have is the ability to create a file share. So this becomes a new type of resource with a new resource provider in Azure. So the top level resource that I go and create under my resource group is now a file share. Any underlying requirements is completely abstracted away from us. So now there's a Microsoft.FileShares resource provider that I can just go and create a file share for. So if I was in the portal, and now I just go and type file share, we see it. It says file shares. And I can just go and create a new file share. And what you'll see here is, well, some of the stuff is standard. Okay, so there's a certain resource group that I'm going to go and use to create things in. I would give it a name. So the name has to be unique within the resource group I'm creating it in. So sav file share 01. Now today, and this is going to change as time goes on, the only type of file share supported right now is SSD and the NFS protocol. Other things will come in the future, but obviously SSD and NFS in many ways are one of the simplest with the least number of interactions. So it's a nice, easy one to actually go and start with. I can pick the provision capacity. I can pick the redundancy, LOS or ZOS because it's premium. I can, so it's based on a very similar model to the provision v2. So provision v2 lets me separately set the IOPS and throughput from the capacity if I want to. So I could manually set the IOPS and manually set the throughput. And then really the only options I have depend on what was the type of file share. Now, because it was SSD NFS, there's really not a lot of options that I have to do right now. One of the things you do notice, though, is I can set a different mount name from that of the resource name. So just because I want the resource to follow a certain convention, the actual name I'm going to use to mount this NFS file share can be different. And then networking, hey, do I want public endpoints? Do I want to go and create private endpoints? So I could disable the public endpoint. I can add private endpoints to this. I can restrict the public endpoint to particular subnets, which I probably definitely want to do because this is NFS. So with the NFS, the connectivity is not based on an authentication today. It's based on the network connectivity. So I 100% for the NFS, I would either use service endpoints that only certain subnets can talk to it, or I would use private endpoints. So again, only things that have an IP route to that would actually be allowed to use it. So those are going to be options I would pay attention to. But I would select the networking and I would go through and I'm done. So I'm just going to go and create the file share. So it's going to do the regular validation and I can go ahead and create it. And that's it. I mean, that is the entire process. Now, when I think about that and what everything we've done there, so what does that mean? So the settings were far simpler. It was very easy and quick to go and do that. The network configuration is just based for this file share. Private endpoints I add would just be for this particular file share. There is no storage account key that can go and get access to this. So this is really the most secure way of doing this. I would be paying for, well, just the cost of this. It's its own resource. So there's no challenges around, okay, well, I've got 5 file shares on this storage account. What is doing what amount of work? It's just really a lot easier from that perspective. And it has its own limits. Those limits apply in both dimensions. Now, there's obviously a certain number of file shares I can create per region, per sub. I think today it's 1,000, but that's going to increase for GA. But the management limits are much higher. And it follows the same model as the Azure Resource Manager. And what that means is, fundamentally, you get a bucket. And the bucket can fill up to a certain level. So that's the maximum number of management operations you could do per second. And what happens is it's refilling at a certain rate. And then obviously when you run the operations, you use a certain amount up. So if I started with a bucket of 375 and it refills at a certain rate, well, if I suddenly do a burst of management operations, I could do whatever that maximum number is in that second. Then the next second would only be the amount that, hey, it's refilling at. And we can actually go and see these limits. So if we jump over super quickly. So here in the limits, I can see that maximum number of file shares. Again, check at GA. But for management read, the maximum the bucket can be is 375, but it refills at 37 a second. So I could burst and do 375, but it's only refilling at 37 a second. So the next second I could do 37. Then if I was only doing a couple, well, it would refill the bucket back up. Same for write operations and delete operations. It has its own maximum and the rate it refills. And the data plane is shared just for normal. And it talks about the various data plane targets as well. So it has its own limits per file share for both management and for my data plane operations. So that's really a key point around this. The pricing is the same as the regular provision v2. So if I just look at the provision v2 pricing for SSD, the NFS, that is going to apply here. There's nothing else you need to know. And that is it. I mean, that's the whole point. Just wanted to introduce, hey, now we have this new top-level file share resource that's just a lot easier. And if it meets your requirements, then I would go ahead and use it. Obviously, probably once it reaches GA, you can start using it. Now, if it's missing a feature, then, hey, you'd probably just carry on and go in and using the storage account. Things like the CSI driver for AKS is not currently there, but it's on the way. So again, until that was available, you may need to go and stay on the storage account. But certainly as you start moving forward and they're going to grow the capabilities, add additional capabilities as it gets closer to GA and then keep working on it, this becomes a far more attractive resource to use over, hey, an aspect of that storage account with all of these shared things. Hey, I can just go and create a file share. In the same way today, hey, we like to just go and create a managed disk, not some unmanaged thing on a page blob. I hope that was useful. Until next video, take care.